Welcome to the Evolution of Aloha podcast with me, Dr. Jerry Ibalarosa Tanel. Now let's talk story. Aloha, everyone, and welcome to the Evolution of Aloha podcast, a Plowline production. And I am your host, Dr. Jerry Ibalarosa Tanel. And today we'll be talking with Daphne Littlebear, Research and Evaluation Manager with the National Indian Education Association. But before we get started, one of the first things that I like to do is to honor the land in which I currently occupy. And I will begin by acknowledging that those of us who are gathering in the Seattle, Washington area, we are on the ancestral homelands of the Coast Salish people who have lived in the Salish Sea Basin since time immemorial. We respect this place and honor the sacred spiritual connections to the land, water, and its people, past, present, and future. And by acknowledging these lands and their original indigenous inhabitants, we reach back to our own indigenous roots and reflect on the impacts of colonialism and the lands from which all our people come. We are connected to our ancestors through this connection to land, for the land is what connects us all. So please join me in taking a moment to honor the land of the traditional people in the territory in which you stand. And today I honor the P.L.A.C.E tribes and allied bands for their enduring care and continuous protection of the land that I currently reside. And so thank you so much, Daphne, for being here from all the way from New Mexico. So tell us about who you are and your connection to place.
Kwatanasai hopa hen kotaisia sa kame hanosata go moshome hanosata go Shawnee go Creek go Yuchi hanosata. Greetings, hello everyone. My name is Daphne Littlebear. I'm from Santa Ana Pueblo in what is so-called New Mexico territory. I'm also Creek, Shawnee, and Yuchi, which is also in so-called Oklahoma, the colonial state. And I'm intertribal, but I reside here in my ancestral lands of Santa Ana Pueblo, which we refer to ourselves as Tamaya, and the lands that we refer to is called Tamaya as well in our language.
Thank you so much. You know, it's like, if you look at my arm, I have like goosebumps. I'm not on my ancestral homeland, and I can't be on my ancestral homelands of Hawaii. I would love to, but because of the impact of colonization and the continuous people from other places buying up Hawaii, Hawaii has turned into this place where the people of Hawaii can no longer live or survive because it's so expensive there, you know. And you know, I met you at NCORE back in May, and you spoke about grounding in place. And when I heard you speak, it's like you were speaking to my heart, and you know, just everything on how we are connected to our people and our land. And when we are separated, just like how I am separated from my own people, I have this, like, I don't know what it is, this need, this want to feel connected. And so I felt so connected to you, just like how I feel connected to a lot of my relatives here in Snohomish County with the Tulalip tribes, with the Stillaguamish tribes. It's like when I go there and I hear their songs, they're not my songs, but it reverberates, it vibrates in me. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And when I hear the language, just like with you speaking your language, there's this energy that just vibrates within me that, I don't know, I just feel like there's this connection to language and people and everything that you talked about. So I want to, let's share with everyone on your, just envisioning futures through Indigenous mapping. So talk about what grounding in place means.
Yeah, grounding. So it was nice meeting you at the NCORE conference back in May. NCORE is a national conference on higher education on race and ethnicity. And I gave a presentation grounding in place in Indigenous mapping as a tool for manifesting futures. And so I actually co-created this tool with two colleagues of mine, Julia Wall from Pueblo and Samuel Kechnikvia from Pueblo. So those we actually were a part of the thought partners for the resilience organization. And you can you can Google the resilience org, and resilience brought us in as thought partners because they were creating an educational experience that we wanted to create for Indigenous folks here in the area. And so myself and my two colleagues were put into to work together to provide a workshop around land, and which is part of people, land, arts, culture, and ecology, which makes up the P.L.A.C.E acronym. And so our task was, how do we talk about land? How do we create a workshop around land? The three of us, have the opportunity to have connection to our ancestral lands, to know, the rivers that run through our lands, to know the songs of the lands, the language of the lands, the food, the art. And, that is a very special thing to be an Indigenous person and to have that in your life, because I recognize, some of my relatives or our Indigenous relatives do not have that. Mm-hmm. And so I don't take that for granted at all. But how do I communicate what my connection to land is with others? Or how do we have a conversation with anyone about what their connections to land look like, or what does that feel like? And so the P.L.A.C.E framework, we wanted to create a workshop that would help our attendees in the workshop, relate to land and what does that look and feel like. I'm also working on my PhD at Arizona State University and in social justice. And so I had the opportunity to do a seminar course in Indigenous mapping. And so through, aspects of participation action research and critical Indigenous research methodologies, I learned an Indigenous mapping tool, which is also similar to resource mapping and to charting, like doing mapping not to scale, but to memory, to like lived memory on the land. And so I was sharing that technique with my colleagues, and I said, I think we can do like a mind mapping, to talk about what does connection to land mean. And so we sat down and we went through it, we looked at it, and we created a chart. And I can show this, actually I can show this, what it looks like. I can pull it up, but we created a chart. And with that chart, it didn't feel right. It didn't feel like the chart captured, connection to land. It didn't feel like it was transmitting what we wanted it to do. And so, one night I was at home and I was thinking to myself, how can I showcase this? How can I in a sense, how can I showcase this or get people to connect with this chart in a different way?
Right.
And it
Right.
was really hard. And so I was sitting around my kind of room, and I love looking at the clouds. I'm biased. I'm really biased, but I love our clouds here in Pueblo land, in
Mhm.
Apache land, in Dene land, in this part of the Southwest in New Mexico. I feel like our clouds have tell us stories and have a life of their own. And anytime I'm somewhere, I always look at the clouds and I just feel like those aren't my clouds. And for us, there's a design, a Pueblo Cloud design that's pretty universal to all the Pueblos here. So we share this.
And that's this one, right?
Yes, that's that cloud design.
Yeah.
I can read it up on the screen. And actually, would you like me to share it?
Yeah, share it. Share it.
Okay, let me do that right now. So let me just bring this up.
Yes.
So this is the chart that we
Mhm.
originally came up with to talk about how do we talk about grounding in community? How do we talk about envisioning a deeper connection to land? How do we talk about storytelling as action through land, art, ecology, culture, and people? And so, like I said, we have this beautiful chart on the left-hand side that you see, but the cloud, this is a Pueblo cloud, and we're like, but how do I wanted to put that chart into this cloud?
Mhm.
And so, I went to the drawing board and I put a cloud and I put these three concepts in each one of the clouds. And I, went back to my colleagues and said, what about this? And they're like, oh, I love that. And I said, each concept is a cloud and the clouds get bigger as we grow. My colleague came back and she said, I think the raindrops can be like the land, art, ecology, culture, and people. And
Mhm.
for us,
Mhm.
growing up, or our lands being in the mountain desert, we pray for rain, we dance for rain, we sing for rain. Rain is something that we need for our crops, for our animals, for ourselves, for the vegetation here. And so we put the droplets coming down on crops, on Pueblo corn. So we indigenize this like resource mapping into something that we could more relate to or connect to. And so it is a very Pueblo centric way of looking at charting and mapping and manifesting, like what does this look like. But I believe like every culture will have something where they can put this into some type of mapping process for them,
Right.
for themselves. So this is what we came up with, and it turned out to be really, really good, the whole process of it.
I think it's absolutely beautiful. And it's like when I was in your workshop over at NCORE, and I was looking at, the clouds and the raindrops and then the crop. I was like, see, look, I have goosebumps again. Every time I think about it, like, oh my gosh, the connection that we have to that, right? It's like the raindrops and the arts and the people and the land and everything that is connected to that falling onto the crops, falling onto the land. We drink the water of the rain, we eat the food of the land. Whatever we do to any of it, it affects us. It
Mhm.
affects us. We have in Western philosophies, there is this idea that we are disconnected from everything else, that we're running around as these individual people that have no responsibility and no accountability to anybody else. So selfish, right? So,
I think also in our workshop, I had shared a beautiful quote by Dr. Rena Swensel from Santa Clara Pueblo. Do you mind if I share her quote?
no, no, absolutely.
Okay. The quote that I shared is, the way we looked at it was mapping our relationships to land and community, and quote, we have gotten to the point of too small a definition of community. I go back to Pueblo thinking because their community was not just human community. It included the place within which we lived. We have become so small in our view of the world. Our world is simply us, human beings. And that is a critical thing we need to get beyond and move back again to seeing ourselves within context. I love that quote. My colleague introduced, found that quote, shared it with us, and we spent a good time talking about it and saying we wanted to share that in the workshop. We wanted to share that with paired up with this, Indigenous mapping for place, because community is not just us. Communities are our land, our animals, our dwellings,
Yes.
the river, and they're all living beings.
Yes.
Even our homes are living beings, our rocks are living beings, like they all are part of this. And so once we have relationships to our community, we have that deeper connection to our land and understand, why we need to care for our land.
Yeah.
And it also, I feel like I haven't been running in a long time, but I used to do like 10Ks every month. Yeah, I used to do like 5Ks every weekend and 10Ks every month when my sister got me into running. And when I started at the beginning of running, I used to like wear headbuds, right, to like motivate me. And then one time I asked my sister, like, how do you, because she runs like across states, like she does prayer runs. My sister has done prayer runs for to bring awareness to land back issues. And so I asked her one time, how do you run so far, so long, and do the prayer runs? And she was like, I meditate. She meditates while she runs. And so I tried it, running by myself, no music, nothing. And the first time it was really kind of hard, but the second time, anytime I heard my footsteps on the ground, I was just like, wow, this is really intense. I'm running on the lands of my ancestors. I'm here, in the same place that they were, and so I just think about those things. And more so now, I feel like anytime I go somewhere, I'm just try to envision what it might have looked like when my ancestors were here, how different it looked, or even how different it changed from when I was a little girl to now. And I'm also trying to look like I said, this is my third season of growing, gardening, growing by myself, with my partner, but I come from generations of farmers. I grew up seeing my grandma have a garden. I grew up seeing my aunt gardening. I grew up seeing my grandpa and my uncle having farms. And one thing came evident to me in the pandemic. It's not that I wasn't aware of it before, but I think it just became more real, was that, I guess my cousins in my generation aren't farming as much, as our previous generation. And so me and my sister and my mom, we would like gather things, at farmers markets or feast days or things that we needed, or even just like support our other relatives who were farming. And so, but when the pandemic hit, we were not able to do that. And I kind of went through all of my stock and I was like, I need to start learning how to do this, what this looks like for not just myself, but for my family. How do I teach my daughter these things? How do I share these stories? And it really was just about visiting with my aunts and my uncles. And I just want to shout out a lot of my friends here in the local area, other Pueblos who inspired me to start engaging in gardening and farming and seed saving. You know, I think it really is a community out here that we're all trying to say, like, we need to foster this knowledge. You know, we have to gain that knowledge in our generation so it keeps continuing. We have to be intentional about that.
Yeah.
So
yeah, exactly. I remember, on my mom's side, my grandfather, he had a beautiful garden, right? He had a beautiful garden, and he had these really nice, beautiful, ripe mangoes all the time. And we would go there and we would eat fresh fruit and fresh vegetables from his garden, and everything was so beautiful. On my father's side, my grandfather was a fisherman. So, and my dad was a fisherman. And so it's like, going out to the ocean and gathering foods and everything. And I, as a little girl, that was something that was just normal, having fresh fruit and vegetables and fresh fish and everything. It was just all normal. Of course, I lived in Hawaii on a small island. And so coming to the States, it's like, don't you all do that here? Right. And people didn't. So when when I think back and I reflect on, what am I made out of? I am made out of kalo, out of taro. I am made out of fish. I am made out of poi. There is the Pacific Ocean that is running through my blood, right? It's like, it's the salt water, everything that my grandparents and my parents and I consume, that's who we are. We are all of these things. And so it's like having this being connected to land, and you were talking about how we need to get back, in that quote, get back to the connection. And we would not only survive, we would thrive. But for me, and I may be biased as well too, I believe that is an Indigenous way of thinking and being. Right? I mean, it's like, as Indigenous women, I teach that to my kids, and I'm about to have my third grandchild, right? And it's like, I have two sons, I have two grandsons, and we're having our first baby girl. And she's due to be here anytime now. And my son right now is out on the water and he's crabbing. And it's like, I'm thinking like, oh my gosh, I remember my dad doing that. And now his son's going to do that. And then it's like, it's just generation after generation, caring for the land, caring for just everything. And when I think about Hawaii, and I think about how overpopulated Hawaii has become, and how people want to go there. Like right now, it's summertime. Okay, there's a couple of things that's going on when it's summertime. Everybody wants a goddamn luau. Everyone is like, I want to do a luau. Let's have a Hawaiian party. It's like, oh, that just bugs me. And then everyone is on vacation. And when they are on vacation in Hawaii, they don't know, or it's like, when they go there, the overpopulation, the waters, it's just like, they're pretty much poisoning our lands. And when the pandemic hit, it's like, my husband and I decided that we were going to build a garden. And we built a garden, a huge garden, enough to, like, I don't know, feed 5-6 families. But we had tomatoes and zucchini, and we had all kinds of vegetables. And every time I would go out in the garden and I would see another fruit coming about, I'd be like, yes, this is something that we gave to the land, right? It's like, in Hawaii, we call it mana. And so the energy that we give to the land gives back to us. Also during the pandemic, nobody was traveling. And so Hawaii pretty much shut down, and it gave the oceans time to heal. It gave the earth time to heal. And when I went back home to Hawaii, I've never seen our water so clear. My sisters were telling me that they would walk on the reef and they would see sea cucumber that was so huge that they haven't seen since we were little. And everything was just growing. Everything was so lush. Everything was so beautiful. The fish that wasn't swimming up to the shores was back. And I was like, oh my gosh, it just brought tears to my eyes on the impact that we have, because in our society, we have this idea that we are disconnected, and we come in with this extracted mindset where we're just going to take without replacing. And that kind of hurts, right? So it's like, I like your indigenous mapping and bringing people back to the connection. How do you go about, or let me rephrase that. Have you ever experienced with individuals where they just didn't understand, they just couldn't grasp the concept of what you were presenting, and how did you navigate that space?
So we presented this or premiered it in fall of 2020 on a virtual workshop. And it was, I think the workshop that we did, a majority of it was an Indigenous audience.
Mhm.
We presented it again to a land grant institution in the Midwest, and it was really hard to gauge because it wasn't interactive. It was more or less a presentation. And so at NCORE, I think that was the first time I got to engage with an audience in person. And I feel like I need to modify it a little bit, because I felt like it spoke to individuals like yourself. But I think for some, it missed the mark of understanding that, yes, there is a connection to place, and but there also has to be an understanding of whose lands you are occupying, whose lands you are living on. And I think it's, when you're presenting in a workshop, it's a very limited time. So you're trying to get all these concepts across, right?
Mhm.
What is connection to land? First, that's a really huge thing. Whose land are you occupying? And the history of colonization, that's a huge thing to talk about. And then,
Mhm.
what does land back and reclamation or water back look like for the
Mhm.
land that you are occupying?
Mhm.
And who is stewarding that land?
Mhm.
And what are the local struggles of that land with the Indigenous folks who are wanting, who are demanding to have, like I said, control over decision making on what happens,
Mhm.
And so I think there's so much things to address and to talk about. And I don't want to say we didn't think about all those things, because they were in our initial discussions when designing. But I think for the sake of the initial project that we were designing it for, it was like connection to land. But now I feel like, okay, I introduced this tool and I like it, but it also can be a catalyst to have all these other conversations,
Mhm.
And so that's something that I'm going to go back to the drawing board and take a look at. And not only is it a connection, because there was a lot of non-native in the audience that did have connections to where they live, but I want to also talk about, again, whose land are you occupying? Are
Right.
you aware of the local Indigenous struggles that are ongoing? How are you knowledgeable of how they are trying to fight for their land back or reclamation or have access to space? And we all have to, or our non-native have to reconcile with that,
Mhm.
And so again, I would like to modify this tool to also have those kind of conversations as well. Um, on my dad's side, just shortly, my dad is on my dad's side in Creek, Shawnee, and Yuchi. And our ancestrals were removed. We were part of the Trail of Tears by President Jackson, and removed off our ancestral lands to what is today Oklahoma. And part of that, when I go to my dad's side, my family in Oklahoma, it's very, they don't have like a land base. They have like a tribal headquarters complex, and then there's like parcel, or there's like checkerboard Indian land, but it's not like a land base. And some of our ceremonial lands are actually in, I don't know, I think for some of them they might be treaty or they might be private, and I'm not sure how the taxes work, but it is completely different from my mom's side, right? To live on my ancestral lands, to live on the migration cycle of my ancestors, versus my dad, where they were forcibly removed, and the fires that we dance around, our people had to carry that charcoal with them from when they were removed and replant it. And so I see the difference. I also see it play out in generational trauma and what that looks like to be forcibly removed. But I also see the resilience and the hope of creating a new connection to a new land because we were forced to. And what does that look like?
Right.
So my family still has our family still has land from our original allotment, from the Dall's allotment that they were given to our family. So we still have original land. And I've had an opportunity. My dad grew up on that land, and I was able to visit it, and I visited this past year, and it's heavy, the history that it carries, but also like it's not a huge piece of land, but it is ours. And it's also like, how do we protect what we have?
Yeah.
So I think, like I said, with going back to the workshop, I think it can be a catalyst for so many conversations. It just depends on what kind of space that you're in. And I think presenting to NCORE, which is not an Indigenous focus convening, it is a BIPOC space, beautiful space, but I also think that presenting it there helped me think about how I can refine what this tool would look like, and how to have those conversations.
Well, it's definitely a framework that I will utilize this framework. It's like Co3 Consulting, my consulting companies, it stands for co-creating cohesive communities. And a lot of times people contact us because they want to talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion. But I always say that we can't talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion without talking about how did we get here in the first place. And we got here because of colonization. And so what I've done is I've based Co3 Consulting on the foundation of Aloha. And it also addresses the impact of colonization through self-reflection, self-awareness, and self-regulation practices. Now, I've worked with a couple of organizations on land acknowledgement, and I developed the first land acknowledgement for the Mukilteo School District here. And I didn't do it on my own because it's not my land. I did it in partnership with with the Tulalip tribes. And this framework of place, it can help people when working with them and developing this land acknowledgement is how are they supporting the Indigenous people, like what you were talking about in the area? How many Indigenous students are they supporting? Who are they employing, right? Who are they employing? If they're just going to have a land acknowledgement, or is it a land acknowledgement where you're just saying, yeah, I have this land, I took it, I'm on it, and that's it, right? It's like, what is that? And I don't want it to be that way. I don't want it to be that way. I was like, no, we're going to know whose land you're on. And then you talked about land reclamation and water reclamation. It's like, yes, you're occupying the land. Now you have a responsibility and an accountability to that land. Now, what are you going to do about it? So it's like, I look at this framework as a great way to start engaging in conversation around these land acknowledgements that are coming up all the time. And, it's like, I think it's a beautiful framework that I know that I've noticed I use beautiful a lot today. Yeah, but it is. I think it is. It's an amazing framework that I feel that I'll be able to use, and I will definitely give the three of you, because it's you, Julia Wall, and Samuel Villarreal.
Catch Nick via.
Okay, yeah, and give you all credit for this, because this is great. I was going to ask you, just to kind of like change course a little bit, what are you getting your doctorate in?
So my doctorate's in social justice education, educational policy. Right now, the working title of my dissertation is Affirming the Educational Sovereignty of Santa Ana Pueblo through the intersections of community-based schooling, Western schooling, and tribal citizenship. So my goal is to talk about to center community-based education, the education that takes place in our community, with the reality that we have to engage with Western education. And in there, I want to talk about elements of belonging, kinship, and tribal citizenship, because without kinship or belonging, it's really hard to engage in community-based education. And so I grew up here in, actually it's a ironic story. I actually was born in Oklahoma, and I grew up here in New Mexico. My parents raised me here in the Pueblo, and so it never it really didn't, it really wasn't clear to me until I was an adult and had my own daughter that these systems that I learned in were designed. They were intentionally designed. And all of the information that my mother, aunties, grandmothers, older cousins, sisters, everything that they taught me was scaffolded throughout my life. And that it's such a in-depth learning that it's ingrained in me to be able to gift that to my daughter and my nieces and any other younger women that I can share what I learned. And I think that's beautiful. And I think those are that's community-based education, that's traditional knowledge,
Yes,
that's Indigenous theory,
yes.
Being an Indigenous teacher. And these things that I was taught by my relatives in real life, they were taught by my ancestors. And I think that's beautiful. Like you said, it's beautiful. It's overwhelming.
Yes.
And
I want to show you something. Hold on. Let me see. I'm so excited for you to get your doctorate, and I want to remain in relationship with you as you go through all of this, because talking about how things are ingrained in you and the scaffolding and the learning, we've been given certain things by our elders, by our ancestors, and some of the things were were given to them that they handed to us based off of survival.
Mm-hmm.
And so we've learned colonized ways. I mean, I feel that we had to decolonize, I'm still working on decolonizing my own self. And so everything that you were talking about on, about a community and about learning and about indigenous ways, I wrote that. So I got my dissertation. See, it's right here. It's like it printed out. And so the title of my dissertation is The Evolution of Aloha, an Indigenous Framework for Systemic Change Through Personal Transformation. And it's a narrative inquiry, and it's the only way that I knew how to transfer knowledge was through story. I don't know how to have this this westernized way of doing things where you have all of these big words and all of these big concepts.
Mm-hmm.
The concepts that I wanted to bring out were our indigenous ways of knowing, our connection to the land, the navigation of the stars, the way that we transfer knowledge through storytelling. That is the only way that we know how to bring forth our voice and our stories, and to demystify the fact that when we talk about stories, it's not storytelling like a book. It is our life. It is our experience, right? And we learn from that. We are molded that way. Everybody is. But then there's like, oh, those natives, they're always telling stories as if it's something less.
Yeah, what's funny is before we got on our call today, I harvested, some of my squash and chili that I'm growing. And I can't eat all that squash, so I, was always taught to share. So I was delivering it to some of my family's homes. And because we're not we're not doing community like ceremonies because of COVID and the pandemic, this is the only time I get to see some of my relatives, is just going to their homes and, masked up, visiting outside, taking gifts to them, like, squash or tea that I peck or anything I can think of that will bring them their memories of being together. That's kind of what I like to do. And the beautiful thing is everyone wants to visit. So every little drop off, it takes me about an hour for each drop off. And, I keep that in mind, but they were all engaging, and those are all stories that they're sharing, whether they're short stories, long stories, multiple stories. Those are moments of like just shared knowledge of history. And today I learned something about my grandmother that I didn't know before. And had I not, harvested, had I not grown squash, harvested, delivered it, I would have never known that story.
Yes.
Oh, with that story would have ever came up.
Right. And it's like that's aloha, right? That's aloha. So it's like the word aloha, it's been kind of like brought down to just simple greeting, hello and goodbye. And people are like, well, it means love and it means grace. It means all of that. It means hello and goodbye and love and grace and compassion and empathy. But I feel that there's a deeper understanding of aloha. So alo is forward facing in front, kind of like what we're doing right now. And ha is the breath of life. So when we are exchanging stories, when we are exchanging ideas, when we are just engaging in this back and forth, we're exchanging the breath of life. And it's sacred. It's sacred. So that time that you're sharing with each other is sacred. And so that is the aloha that I feel our ancestors really meant it, and not just a simple greeting. Because like you're saying, you go to your relative's house. It's not just a greeting. It's not like hi and goodbye. You're there and you're engaging, and it's all because you grew something, because of your energy and because of your mana, your energy into the connecting, and the grounding in place is connecting to everything else on who you are. I mean, imagine if our entire world thought that way and they understood the sacredness of the connection that we have to the land. We wouldn't have to be worried about our waters and our aquifers being poisoned. We wouldn't have to worry about the land reclamation. And, it's like people who are going to Hawaii, especially on Oahu, on the island where my family is from, is that right now the only aquifer on the island is being poisoned because military went ahead and they have a container that is leaking jet fuel into the waters. And it's like, if you just had this connection, if everyone just had this connection, we wouldn't have this problem. And so how do we, I'm so excited to acknowledge you and just see what you're going to do with your research and become Dr. Daphne Littlebear, right? I mean, imagine what your ancestors, they're like, yes. And I feel, every time when I hear these powerful women, coming together, and I'm like, oh my gosh, we're doing all the same work from a different point of view. And we need to. And I am being biased, but I feel that there's a lot of us Indigenous women that are rising up. And it's like, if you would just listen to us for a minute.
Well, I think as women, I don't know, you just feel, I think it's, you definitely have that connection to your body is a vessel to create life.
Yes.
Whether you've had children or not, I think you have that vessel of creating life and what that feels like when you carry life.
Right.
I don't want to take away from Indigenous men because they do have those relationships, but I think as women, when you carry life or you have this body that can create life, you know what that feels like. Mm-hmm. Right. And so it's just, like I said, it's all these lessons that I learned growing up from so many different people in my life, my family, my community, my friends. And I'm just blessed to be, like, I'm gonna quote, one of my favorite artists, Rosby Sessom, she says, I was blessed to be born a Pueblo woman. And I feel like that. I feel blessed to be an Indigenous woman. I feel blessed to have learned from my family and to be able to share that, with my daughter and my nieces and, my relatives, and to hold or to maintain that knowledge with my sisters and cousins, because it's hard. Mm-hmm. I think getting older, I realize I have certain talents that I offer to my family, and my other cousins have their talents, and together we have to continue on with, how our aunties brought us up, and, it's balancing everything. Getting this degree that I've been working on for some years, it's so hard. Mm-hmm. It's like, I don't doubt my talent or my abilities, but it's so emotionally hard and a lot of emotional labor to have to deconstruct things from a Western perspective and then reconstruct something that makes sense to you to explain it to people who only view things from a Western thought process, or will only validate things if it makes sense in a Western thought process. And I think that's been my biggest challenge. Mm-hmm. But also, again, I'm really excited to have gotten this far in my education. I'm first gen in my family. Yeah. And in this doctoral pursuit, I'm first gen in my community. And so I'm giving myself grace that when you're navigating something, it's already hard to begin with, but when when you're the first and you don't know what it looks or feels like, it feels like it feels like you're alone in the process. And you can have a support system, but I feel like a lot of it has to be, it is kind of like a solo thing, like, because you have to be the one typing it, you're the one that has to be the one motivated. And so almost close to the finish line, I'm not going to give up, but I just wanted to share that because I think I'm in this part where it's every week is emotional week for me.
Yes,
I'm in the dissertating part where it's just an emotional thing, and I have to, keep plugging away.
Yeah. In my work, I talk a lot about the 5 phases of decolonization, which was written by Pukala Inui, who is a attorney and a Hawaiian activist and my elder. And the 5 phases of decolonization is to rediscover and recover. It's like in that phase, there's a lot of us who are rediscovering their indigeneity and recovering from finally realizing what it means to be indigenous. And it's like from the rediscovery to recovery, there is a phase of mourning. And that's, like you were talking about, like, oh my gosh, that emotional labor, that emotional roller coaster on, for me, it was, what does it mean to be indigenous? What does it mean to walk as a indigenous woman in a westernized world who doesn't understand, who doesn't care about who I am as an indigenous person, right? And then also coming to this place of decolonization for myself, understanding that I have been assimilated into a culture, and the odds are against me as an indigenous woman. So there's this mourning phase where it's like, oh my gosh, it's so hard. After the mourning, there's dreaming of a new future, looking at my mo'opuna, my grandchildren, and being like, I've got to dream a different world for them, right? And then pass the dream on. And then there's a commitment. And the commitment is waking up every day and writing and going through writing something like this, where it's like, I'm not used to doing this. I don't know. I still struggle with AP format, right? And all of these other things, right? These European boundaries that we have to be able to enter into, so that way we can change the system for the better. And that's our action. So it's rediscover and recover, mourning, dreaming, commitment, and action. And that's the 5 phases of decolonization that I feel a lot of us, and for, personally for me, that I have to go through. And I realized that as I start to learn their language and understand how their tools work, then I can go in and utilize their language and utilize their tools to change the system, so that way the next generation doesn't have to feel that emotional labor that we're all going through.
And I think
so
create new spaces or new learning spaces for our own. At least that's how I feel. I feel like in the area that I live, there's so many amazing indigenous individuals, folks that are just creating healing, rematriating spaces,
Yes.
What does this look like? Because sometimes that isn't going to be provided in the institution.
Right.
So
Right.
it's like, how do we do that? on our
Right.
own? How do we do that for ourselves? How do we do that for our communities? How do we do that for everyone, you know? And so I just, like I said, I live in a really beautiful community surrounded by a lot of amazing community organizers, and they inspire me. I hope I inspire them. And I think it's reciprocal. I think it's really reciprocal, just like the land. It's reciprocal. I think when you grow up that way or learn that way, all your relationships have a tendency to become a reciprocal relationship.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. It's definitely about the reciprocity. And, I mean, and I feel that there is a way, it's like in the beginning when I talked about the land acknowledgement, reaching back to your own indigeneity. We're all indigenous to some place, even the people of Europe. And people of European descent, they have been colonized, they have actually colonized themselves. And so it's like that's how they all ended up here. It started way back when, but they are so far and ripped away from their own indigeneity that when they look at other people's culture, they want to take it. So they have this extraction mindset where it's like, "Ooh, I like that. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to take aloha, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to take the dream catchers, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to take yoga, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to take all of these things because they're working towards creating something else." Right? That whole thing of creation. Sometimes I feel like, you know what? I feel that people of European descent, they need to try to go back as far as they can in their own indigeneity and find their own culture, appreciate that culture. So then that way they can see how they can look at our culture and not appropriate our culture, not take our culture, appreciate it. And so it's like there's so much when it comes to looking at you're looking at the acronym of P.L.A.C.E and your doctoral work in social justice, right? It's like it's all interwoven in between that. And so I'm excited to see what the outcome of your research is going to be. And then we've got to get together and put our research together.
I'm excited too. I think the hardest thing, so a little bit about my methodology. I come from an oral-based community. We don't have a written tribal constitution. And the way that we care for each other, it's an oral governance. So meaning you're all raised in these values, right? And you will understand what those values mean. And so we've been able to really affirm our sovereignty in a very oral way in our community. And so I think in doing my research, because it's going to be based here in my community in Ana Pueblo, it's something that I want to do to affirm our oral history. Like, what does that mean? Not that it's not affirmed, but how do I, in the sense, like, I think there's like there's one book written from, a fellow, like a Tamaya man or a person from Santa Ana. And this book was written or actually got released in 1994. And so I kind of want to capture stories of my lifetime, for the next generation, to share that out foremost. And I also like, and I don't want to, this is where the part where I'm cringing, because like with the academy, it's like you can't really cite it until it's been published, right?
Right. Yes.
So I don't want to say like the academy is affirming our knowledge, but in a sense, I do want to provide a time for our people, for our future Pueblo scholars to cite some some of my work to capture a time of what our people were thinking or what the process was. Because the book that like I cite a lot in 1994 helps me think about what were they thinking at that time? What were they writing about? What were the issues? And that's kind of what I want to do for my generation, and be like, I guess, like a community researcher. And that's what I am, and that's what I do, and that's the skills that I've learned and then currently learning, and it's surreal. I don't know, I
Yes.
just think it's very surreal.
It is surreal. It is. And when people start calling you doctor, that's surreal as well too, right? It's like when so my dissertation was printed and I just got it like last week. And I'm
Oh,
holding it. I'm holding it in my hand. It comes in and my son's here. And my son picks it up and everything. And I open it up and he's like, "What is it?" And I pull it out. And I'm just looking at him. And I said, it's my dissertation. He was like, "Mom, that is awesome." And he's like, "Whoa, this is so cool." He's like, "You did all of this." And I just sat there and I looked at him and I said, "It's a dissertation." And he's like, "What's wrong with you?" He's like, "Why are you making it seem like it's just nothing?" And I'm like, "I don't know what to feel. I don't know what to feel." It's published, it's on ProQuest. I've been getting these little messages and everything that people are like downloading my research and everything like that, which means that we are contributing to scholarship. We're contributing to the next generation. And so when we share our words, and that's why it's like I always think about aloha and um, how we share our words, how my words that is from my breath is being printed onto this paper, and the responsibility and the accountability that I have to my words, right? It's like scary.
that's what I wanted to emphasize with our oral history, is it's our breath that is the most powerful.
Mhm.
And so in my methodology, I have a community advisory committee that has advised me on my methods,
Yes.
because
Yes.
we don't have, like I said, we don't have a tribal IRB that's like through tribal resolution.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
I'm, a first gen going through this process for my community. And so I come up with this method grounded in our values.
Yes.
And when I was recruiting individuals to sit on my community committee, I couldn't do that through a formal letter. I couldn't do that through a phone call. I couldn't do that through um, an email. And this is all pre-COVID, where I went to their homes and I, asked them for help. I explained to them I was in this dissertation program. I had to explain what that was,
Yep.
what I was trying to do. But essentially, that was an exchange of our breaths,
Mhm.
right? So when they agreed to help me, that means they've exchanged breath with me and that they're going to follow through with me on this
Yes.
journey.
Yes.
And so they still check up on me, they still encourage me. Um, it's a little bit more challenging because it's COVID. So there's, text message, phone calls, video calls.
Mhm.
And, if we're outside in a safe way, we're able to, talk. But I think when I took my mom to Hawaii, like, I think 2010, when I was there for WIPSI. This was a long time, about what, 10, 12 plus years ago.
Wow. Yeah.
And one of the presentations was talking about the mana, the exchange of breath. And then my mom started crying because he was like, "That's what we do." And I was like, "Yeah, it is." you know, and
Yes.
it's just so, I think, so amazing how we're able to connect across geographical regions and mountains and oceans and stars. and our practices are so, like, they're different, but they're similar.
Yeah.
And it just makes me happy that we met. I think my grandparents are meeting your grandparents. My grandmother, for considering the time she grew up in and being a Pueblo woman of that time, she actually loved to travel. And she traveled, to Hawaii too. And she traveled to Canada and to Mexico and she even traveled to Chicago. But I think, because she traveled, it always gave me that curiosity of Indigenous people across the globe.
Right.
I wonder what they do in this season, or I wonder what their songs sound like, and I just feel like when I travel and I get to eat other people's food or hear their songs or hear their stories, it just makes that trip, that visit more richer. And anytime I go somewhere, my family always constantly reminds me to greet the land, to greet the people, to take that spirit and say, oh, we're greeting you in a good way, and we hope you are well, and to have a good trip, and that we send them our good wishes. That's what my uncles always tell me every time I travel. Don't forget to do that. And I'm like, okay, I will. So I don't know. I'm happy I have that I was raised to have this relationship, and I'm happy to talk with other people about it. Um, and like I said, to just share space. And it's just such a enriching life.
Yeah, it sure is. And it's like that's how I feel when I go up to the res and I'm with the Tulalip tribes or with Stillaguamish, and hearing their songs and hearing, sharing in space with them, sharing medicine, sharing food. It's just so rich and it's so welcoming. And I feel like, oh my gosh, this is what we would do. If you were in my land, this is what we would do, right? So it's great. But anyway, Daphne, I just wanted to thank you so much I'm so happy. I am so happy that we met and we were able to connect and be here with each other and, share our stories and exchange in aloha. And so for the closing, I just want to let all of our listeners know that you have been listening to the Evolution of Podcast, a Plowline production with Daphne Littlebear. So tune in for upcoming episodes with other amazing women. And don't forget to subscribe to the Evolution of Aloha and Plowline podcast, available on all popular podcast platforms. And this is, again, the Evolution of Aloha. I'm Jerry Balarosa Tennell, your host. And to continue this work, please consider becoming a supporter and head over to patreon.com/Plowline Productions, and your contributions will go directly towards producing and building engaging quality content. So thank you so much for being here. Please remember to take care of each other, and a hui hou. Until then, aloha, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you.